Welcome to Dweller of the Dark. We are a channel earning the yellowed and blackened bones of many prominent authors. We'll be digging up several obscure, strange, and forgotten authors who influenced many of the great horror, science fiction, and fantasy writers today. Comment below if you like. If you have authors that you'd like to see recognized, list them in the comments or contact our author page. Authors, we want to give back to our fellow writers and fans with the occasional fresh blood. Promoting the next Matheson, Lovecraft, or Poe. Be sure to get a few of our immortal horror masters to come out of their graves. Subscribe and become a follower and fan. As a subscriber, you'll get the latest announcements and premieres. If your work unnerves or terrifies, we will put your story on our channel and webpage for free. Certainly, we will provide feedback. Subscribe for more tales of the horrifying, obscure, strange, and forgotten. We'll have quite a collection climbing out of the tombs. If you like any of our tales, crush or cut the like button below. Check out our other stories on YouTube and our websites. YouTube, Dweller of the Dark. Official website, dwellerofthedark.com. You can find us on Facebook at Jeffrey LeBlanc Horror Writer. Find our books and stories on Amazon, Kindle. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, Dweller of the Dark. What do I know of the mysteries of the sea? Having sailed from the furthest reaches of Timor-Leste, rocked across the Atlantic twice, and swam those beautiful Gulf of Mexico waters off Grand Isle, I can say there's always an air of exhilaration and dread. Especially when you swim or sail over places such as Titanic. There is a chilling reality knowing the dead rest on the ocean's cold floor. Or not. We wrote The Mariner of Caminada Pass on May 21st, 2020. It was published by Cloven Hoof and is available on Amazon Kindle in ebook and paperback. The story has been submitted to HWA for consideration in the Bram Stoker Award competition. The tale of a son trying to solve a mystery concerning his parents swam to life after my latest trip into the treacherous Red Sea. While I didn't care for the inhospitable desert weather and those 20-odd security checkpoints, I was in awe of the isolated beauty and the hospitality of Saudi Arabia. The great crew on the Ocean Duke kept all our challenges laughable and stress-free. The stories of Russian, Polish, United Kingdom, and Norwegian culture were a treasure trove of unforgettable and humorous tales. In a final word, this tale of Pierre Santini would never have come to surface had it not been for my father and his love of the sea. Seems every chance Dad got when my siblings and I were young was spent in and around Grand Isle with Dad's best friend, Carl Thayer. The swimming, storytelling by bonfires, and fishing were some of the best times we had with him. I never got the chance to tell him thank you for those memories before his untimely and suspicious death. Hopefully, on whatever shore in the beyond he has landed, he hears these words. A legendary mystery is told in the community of Grand Isle. The aged mariner may proclaim. And on the first winter breaker, the Grand Isle's coldest winter, Pierre Santini plunged into the sea, seen no more. Then, the teller of the tale may pause with haunting eyes as the fires crack in the bonfire, the sea roars, and the wind howls, possibly an ancient chime. With a whispering voice on the third crash of a wave, they may even say, but none on the island will ever say he died. To Marty Santini, son of the drowned man, saw the mysterious sightings of his father? Or will he too become a part of the legend of the Mariner of Caminada Pass? The Mariner of Caminada Pass by Jeffrey LeBlanc. Dedication to Dad, who always taught us the wonder and mysteries of the sea. Chapter 1. The Legend. The aged mariner made proclaim, and on the first winter breaker of Grand Isle's coldest winter, Pierre Santny plunged into the sea and was seen no more. Then, the teller of the tale may pause with haunting eyes as the fires crack in the bonfire, the sea roars, and the wind howls with possibly an ancient chime. With a whispering voice on the third crash of a wave, they may even say, but none on the island will ever say he died. The townfolk of Grand Isle's coast often keep many strange stories of their island, tales that sometimes cast long shadows on marrow-colored sands and beneath tomb-gray oaks. Islanders are pragmatic and practical, though they can be drawn into the secret and superstitious sometimes. The supernatural on those windswept nights, with the moon ghostly full, really kindles the fires of imagination. The great waves of the Gulf of Mexico battering Grand Isle's shore brings many islanders to hide away in their homes on foreboding nights, when a screech or a scream may be something more. They find security, possibly sanctuary, or so they think, in such places. Isolated and solitary, Grand Isle and its people live a life separate from the rest of Louisiana, and the world for that matter. You could call the quiet community nestled within saltwater grasses, mangrove and myrtle marshes a banana republic. You wouldn't be wrong in that description. Many the pirate and outlaw has called the place home. Some still do. Sprawling 7 miles of coast is a place that keeps many secrets. Grand Isle is where people know when to leave some mysteries alone. But having said that, it's not unusual either for a fool to occasionally poke a stick into the wrong hornet's nest of heebie-jeebies, and then get more than they bargained for. Mephistopheles' pun intended. Grand Isle, last Barry Island, protecting Louisiana's coast from storm and surf. A tiny island that the sea is eating alive. Historic is this wondrous place, whose very bones are being pulled to the fathoms by fingers of skeletal foam. Thriving once as a grand pirate's paradise, the beaches are now being ripped apart by the roaring waves and hurricanes of the Gulf of Mexico. For no island of shifting sand can last forever. Nights in late fall can sometimes run deathly cold on Grand Isle. Wintry nights on the eroding reef can bring an icy chill and a shiver to the bones. A haunting tale of the sea is shared on such nights among the desolation of the dunes and vacant marshes. It's a tale twice told against frigid north winds. In the darkness by firelight, islanders can be seen whispering against monstrosities of blackest wood and devilish red flame. As their fires crackle and cast shadow, many ghostly old mariners recall in hushed reverence the strange tale of Pierre Santny. His tragic lore is whispered between the howling winds and crashing waves of the shore. So, if you are ever traveling along the Louisiana coast near Grand Isle, Remember, many things are whispered about Pierre Saintny. You may find a roaring bonfire on a beach with crashing waves. At the bonfire, people will be listening to Pierre's tale. The aged mariner may proclaim, and on the first winter breaker, Grand Isle's coldest winter, Pierre Saintny plunged into the sea and was seen no more. Then, the teller of the tale may pause with haunting eyes as the fires crack in the bonfire. The sea roars and the wind howls with possibly an ancient chime, with a whispering voice on the third crash of a wave, they may even say. But none on the island will ever say he died. Is it a cautionary tale of love and the sea? We'll let you judge for yourself as the waves thunder. Look out to the infinite horizon. Can you see something? Something? Possibly on the jetties or even further? Sings a sad, longing song. You can picture the hidden faces on the lone stretch of beach. You can smell the black and gray smoke of these locals. You catch the scent of sea, of aged seaweed and brine. Feeling the heat of the roaring fire between orange and crimson flames. You see shaking, weathered hands, genuflecting maybe in lower voices, speaking in French whispers. You see them timidly peering out beyond the darkness of the vast sea and shudder. Pierre Saintny, once a simple mariner, later consumed in a raging storm of grief and insanity. Pierre Saintny, now the dead, a phantom of a hushed legend, a specter, a ghost, or a terror of the sea, some say. The folly of foolishness, others might say. A legend that surpasses many of the macabre and strange tales of the islanders. Dark was his demise, the pious church parishioners will tell you. A simple story that continues to flow up and down the coast in the words of mariners, sailors, and seafarers. The same group that can carry a tale like a second line from Port Fourchon up the mighty Mississippi River on into New Orleans. For Pierre Saintny lived and fished only a few miles down the coast from that town at the Caminada Pass. A pass that held the shrimp, the speckled trout, sea turtles, and all manner of sea life. A place where it was possible to see the grayish porpoise and brown pelicans dive and erupt from the sea. A serene scene of beauty where the graceful peregrines and merlins still skitter and skip the pearl and green waves of the Gulf. Sometimes the great gray and white bald eagles with their predatory cousins, the falcons, could be heard during the annual migration. All these great beasts seem to fixate near this churning inlet called Caminada Pass, diving, flying, and twisting amongst decayed fortresses and scattered scrub oak forests between Grande Terre and Grand Isle. What of the man I mentioned? Pierre lived the life of most men. As a sailor, he suffered the rigors of hard toil, working the ocean. As a man of the sea, he courted such work with songs, smiles, and happiness. To the old lady down by town church selling pies, I remember Daddy saying, "Hey, Miss Evelyn, you keep cooking them sweet potato pies, my Dominique will leave me for a skinnier man." And Mrs. Evelyn Thoreau fired right back. "Serves her right. If you become a lazy man, Pierre Saintny, no one would accuse you of that." Daddy would think he had won the lottery when the widowed spinster said that. "Why, thank you, ma'am. Lazy Pierre Saintny, never. But a bum for sure." as Evelyn would slap her thighs and my daddy would take to cursing her in French. Stop! Think of our son, Dominique. Why? Daddy screamed on the day of Mama's death. I remember that day. Great storms converged on the island that day. We were headed back to the house to avoid the blast of arc and lightning and the deluge of rain. Mama had smiled all morning with me as we walked the length of beach on her last day. On the return, midway of the island, in a treacherous area of known undertow fatalities, she changed. I heard a chime with her. It hadn't resonated much with me, but Mama strained her ears and began to head out, past the limestone jetties. I remember so much pain then. I screamed for her to come back. Mama kept running. I screamed for Daddy. Mama by then was past the jetty, swimming into 8-foot waves and treacherous surf. I caught just a brief glimpse of her head as Dominique Santini went over 2 large waves, then disappeared. Daddy would have met the same fate, but Joe Bradbury tackled my father as he was waist deep in the ocean. Then Sheriff Roscoe Besson and the deputies arrived and brought him up on the beach. I was stunned as I sat there. Curiously, the chimes I had heard were gone. Now, all that was left were 2 broken-hearted men, Daddy and me. Mama had killed herself in the riptide, I told myself. But my pain was nothing to Pierre Santini. Dominique had been his only love. Her act broke his heart. Rage was all he knew now. Sadness so encompassing that only self-inflicted bloody pain could ease it. I see him, even now, punching an invisible nemesis through sand-covered bleeding fist. Dominique! Dominique! Why? I hear his sobs and I see tears. Then the long tendrils of snot. All this occurs between the storm's thunder and the ocean's roar. You said you'd never leave. You swore you'd never leave our boy. I'd say time healed the man, but I can't lie there. No one who witnesses a death or a death like that is truly ever right again. It took months and then years to get the shadow of my father back. And the man that came home wasn't the man I'd known or loved as a son. As best as I could describe, he was a walking ghost of anger and rage. He was the embodiment of a dead man walking. They had haunted our once happy home, only capable of grief and rage. But in time, even that was lost to the sea. To hasten the last vestiges of my father, lies and cruelty seemed to walk hand in hand in our seaside community. Mom being found out in an affair, so she killed herself, was the most prevalent. That disgusting lie put 2 men in the hospital by Daddy at Cisco's Cajun Cantina. They ate away at Daddy with more lies and more unnecessary drama, eventually killing the last of the good man. The nefarious people of Grand Isle killed Pierre Santini's humanity. They are fools, son. They talk of people and gossip like cackling hens. Be above them. Talk of science. Talk of ideas to change our world. Mama would have expected no less. Wise words, life-changing words from a broken man. Even as his world fell further into hopeless oblivion, and Pierre felt the burn and sting of heartache, pain and tears, he looked out for me. He lived his later years with arms and hands outstretched to the sea. A crippled man longing for mercy from some unseen force. Was it a call to Dagon, a monstrous Leviathan, or the merciful sharks to end his existence? I didn't know then, and certainly I don't know now. ranting of sea monsters. He must have gone island crazy, the locals would say of Daddy. Nah, fried his brain with dope or them hospital tranquilizers. Knowing that one, others would add. Daddy would yell ferociously, spouting at all these cynics with, "I'd rather live with them in the sea. I no longer see people on the land, especially this island. It's worth my time. Only time I find any of you the least bit interesting is when I'm drinking. In my travels of the world and the horrendous acts humans have done to each other. I can't blame the man for his desire. Wouldn't his fantastic world of blue, place of peace and harmony, be a utopia for all? There the songs of sirens, mermaids, or something beyond our comprehension would whisper between the foam of secrets hidden in the sea's deepest abysses. His world was certainly one few could understand, especially a mainlander like me, who rebuked his ways, turned my back on him. I broke his heart, shunning the island Daddy had loved. For you see, I know the man of legend. I know Pierre Saint-Denis. I knew his warmth from the great man's hugs as a child. I knew his fierce temper and the slap of steel hands when I had done wrong. I knew his tears when Mama died, and I added to his sorrow when I left him alone with his world by Caminada Pass. I knew the man. I knew the love-sickened lunatic who was never the same after Mama leaped into that undertow never to return. I know his sorrow after the love of his life was gone, for I am his son. Loved had my daddy been, ever so lost he had become with Mama's death. Our mother, as all had said, was lost to the treacherous currents of Grand Isle, and in Gulf of Mexico waters, with all manner of shark and sea life, most assuredly dead. As blast of purple lightning cracked and crashed into the sea from above, large drops of rain pelted his red, crying face. Salt water darkened by rolling thunderheads surrounded Daddy. I watched him till I fell asleep on the beach. For hours he crawled up in a sobbing ball in despair. There were moments, though, when his Cajun temper would roar him out of that place. It was then that Pierre Saint-Denis pounded the very sand where Mama had entered the ocean with bloodied fist. He'd screamed and wailed. "Why did you take Dominique? She was the best of us. Damn you, God." No words quite captured the sympathy I felt for him. No words captured my own pain from the loss of my mother. No longer feel Mama's hands rub my head, pat my back. Mama's smile when I'd done good in school. Mama's laugh when Daddy or I made a fool of ourselves. And I'd miss the comfort and security watching the two of them walking the Caminada shores, hand in hand. In those cherished moments, the world was golden, as it should be. But knowing Mama's beautiful songs would cease evermore almost made me scream with Pierre. I should have gauged the depths of Daddy's great despair. I should have done more to console and bring him back to us, but he seemed forever fixated on the beyond of ocean blue. Not surprisingly, grieved by the love of his life, Daddy surrendered to the sea. 3 years to the day Mama left us, on that legendary winter day, on the third breaker, Pierre was seen casting himself into frigid surf. And on the first winter breaker of Grand Isle's coldest winter, he was seen no more. But again, none on the island will ever say he died. I say again, I knew the legend. I knew the man, fallible, unkind, and certainly in later life, unloved. For the last, I'm ashamed and deserve no forgiveness. Who should know better and care more for their father than his only son? I, Marty sent me. Carry that great burden and hope someday I can put it to rest. Chapter 2. Marty. Driving in my old Chevy, I make the long 2-hour trip to Grand Isle. On the drive, pardon me as I descend into that winding tower to the past. Low on gas, I stop in at Huey's gas station. Huey's was still thriving, go figure. As I get out and pump gas, I see the place had upgraded the sign. And that was about it. Then I see a boat I worked on as a boy, the Black Magic. Now it was a sunken ship. It too had been a victim of the sea. In this moment, I recall the Thomas More poem that eerily captures the moment. I speak the quote Daddy told so well by firelight on the shores of Grand Isle, in a time when Mama was alive and when the world was full of a golden wonder and magic. Yon shadowy bark had been to that wreck, and the dim blue fire that lights her deck do play on as pale and livid a crew as ever yet drank the churchyard dew. For the briefest of moments, I shudder as a child at that thought. Mister, why are you staring at that old sunken ship? Why are you talking to yourself with that funny voice? A blonde-haired boy in his early teens looks at me puzzled. I thought I might have worked on that boat at one time. I said it with just a hint of my island accent. Hat jump? The boat hasn't sailed since before I was born, he says matter-of-factly, then continues. You sure that's the boat? A lot of boats sunk around that corner. Daddy says the busted old pipelines caused it. I wanted to tell him that the whole area was a dense spiderweb of intersecting rusted pipelines and busted valves. I knew this from the work I did in my day job. Instead, I said, you don't say. I'll remember that if I ever sail around that bend. Quit bothering the man, Turtle. You got them chores done, knucklehead? A rotund man in his late 50s waddles up fussing the boy. I could hear the man wheezing as he made his way down the gas station stairs. It looked like Huey Plaisance, but I couldn't be sure. By his shirt and demeanor, the guy had to be the station owner. The Huey Plaisance I remembered had been an athletic man who ran 15 miles a day down the beach. He couldn't be Huey. Sorry, sir. My son was a bit too curious with strangers. He was apologetic as he started to empty the trash can by the pump and check the maintenance of his gas pumps. Obviously, it was a ploy to learn who I was. Of course, I was a stranger to the island now, and the island rules were in place. Strangers had to be watched carefully. He won't bother you anymore. What brings you to Grand Isle? Family. I looked closely. It had been 30 years since I'd seen the athletic man, but the voice and mannerisms were unmistakable. It was Huey. How you doing, Huey? I know you, sir. Huey looks puzzled and intensely at me, but there's no recognition. Had I been gone that long? It's Marty. I know it's been a while, my brother. I see he had to think. Age had not been kind to his memory. You that other crazy Santney. Damn, I thought I'd seen a ghost. He gives me an intimidating stare and sees I don't flinch, then slugs my arm. But you a lot uglier than Pierre was. Yeah, it's you, mon ami. You got old too. We both start laughing. I see you become the fat dude after all, Plaisance. I see him stop and eye me up to square off. Yeah, but the owner now. Not the attendant, bitch. That old man Sava said I'd be. You got your daddy's guts to say that. Or his crazy, Shaq. I see Huey's belly jiggle in his red gas station shirt. In that moment, I got the vision If he had a beard, Huey would have been a Cajun Santa Claus. What brings you to slumming with us fat folks? Checking on things. The house and land. So his eyes light a minute. Tells me he's been poaching the rabbits out there again, as he did when we were kids. Daddy, you don't want to remember the past. Can't remember the past of my childhood. As a child, won't allow myself to remember back when the world was magic and that sunken ship across the bayou is still afloat. Oh? By the sounds of that and his nervous look away, he's still doing it. He's definitely been poaching a lot of rabbits over 30 years. I can't resist. I wonder how many rabbits we got left. Now you know damn well, poaching out of season is ILLEGAL, illegal. I'd never do that on a friend's land. I see I have him good and shook up. At that moment, a part of his flap unrolls out of his side shirt. Scaled and stretched, the skin is pocked with scars. It's okay, Huey. He looks back at me wary. It is? Huey plays on, still cautious about my answer. How's that, Santley? I hear the governor is going to change the calendar, allow Louisiana hunters to hunt more. I give him a wry smile. Huey inquires, he's going to let us hunt in late September instead of October, like in the old days, Marty? I had him on the line now, so now I dropped the hammer on him. No. I paused a moment and watched him, then said, he's going to request a change to the calendar, Huey. How so, Marty? Now I'm hearing good news, changing that wacky calendar for hunting. He clapped his hands together in excitement. Yeah, he's changing the calendar to 13 months out of the year. Since Huey Plaisance hunts 12 months out the year, we need another month added. I saw my childhood friend's face lose all the color at first, then turn beet red as he took to cursing a storm in French. That ain't funny, Marty Plaisance. Don't you have a spook house to go repair? When you go in the cell? That last question ended our jest and my time here. How about when Daddy comes back? That seems to be the bullshit you guys are slinging to increase tourism around here. Drag our family through mud and more pain. I couldn't resist. I had my late father's temper. Huey did something strange then. Marty, what people see and say, it's real, man. No fooling. You in on this caper too? I know the gas station business booms when the tourism kicks up. You and Mark Cormidale playing this out? I said this as the pump clicked and my tank was full. Marty, it's been 25 years. Have you forgotten? Huey took off a baseball cap he was wearing to push sweat out of his eyes and hair. I don't know why I asked, but I did. What did I forget? You got lucky and left home, Huey mutters. I lost both my parents to suicide. Not so lucky, Huey. Had to interrupt the reality of my leaving. I had no choice. He continued. Like I said, lucky to live with your Uncle John. Things happen around here, remember? We knew as kids that this place wasn't always roses and buttercups. Oh well, whatever, man. I gotta go. Have some ghost busting to do. I left him still trying to figure out what I meant by the latter. Time is a cheating bastard. Takes your memories and weakens your flesh. In time, even the old familiar houses, shrimp and oyster shacks, become distant and indistinct. I may have been a Santley from Grand Isle, but I was no longer of Grand Isle. Driving on to the end of Grand Isle to our old home at Caminada Pass, I feel ever the loner. A man jettisoned back to childhood, as alone as any stranger visiting the place I grew up. All I see now are impoverished people, dilapidated shrimp sheds, and aged ships. Mom and Daddy are gone. All I have to remember them is this weathered picture of the three of us in this weathered, mosquito-covered house. There must have been 5 in the picture in my retro 70s polo corduroy pants and sky blue jacket. I think of that day of cotton candy and the mechanical horse, only a dime to ride back then. I see elation and smiles as both my parents put me on the horsey. I smile and tears well up again as I head the Chevy through overgrown marsh shrubs and a pothole-covered road. I hear echoes from my past of Mama's laughter flying a kite with me, past swaying waves of emerald and amber marsh grasses and estuaries. A lonesome drive I make listening to KCIL radio and a little Wayne toots. Wayne's pleaded wails for his woman to take his hand. I can't help but wipe back another tear and think of Pierre and Dominique dancing in the living room. I remember I clapped along as a child to their dancing and this very song. Back when the world was golden and as it should be. In early life, Daddy was the man our small island respected. And Pierre Santini, with his tremendous physical strength, could be most certainly feared. His physical presence and keen intellect most certainly demanded it. Pierre was a mariner of the sea. The sea had trained him to be so. Powerful cordwood forearms attached to calloused hands from decades of pulling nets from the ocean. Equally formidable, hulking, broad shoulders and vice-like hands that had picked champagnes of shrimp and bushel upon bushel of crabs. His face bore the scarred, leathered patches of skin of sun and sea, and the toil of punishing hard work. These were his badge of honor. Finally, his powerful legs supported a distinct barrel chest, a chest that when he exhaled on extra long days was the very breath of an ocean storm. That storm became as frightening as a hurricane when one dared to ignite his temper and bring his rage. I crunched down on seashells and dried grasses, walking and stumbling through an overgrown trail toward my former house. Tall, fluorescent emerald and verdant wire, salt and meadow cordgrass sway in the cool Gulf breeze. One could easily get lost in those forests of quiet green. I say to myself upon approaching the last tower of marsh grasses, well, Marty, here we go. Strands of dead wire grass fall off my head and back. I head now to a small estuary and a long bridge brushing off the remnants of more grass and leaves. It's approaching dusk, and I hear a lone seagull cry. As I walk up our long wharf to the house, I catch sight of a large shadow. The animal is moving and splashing in the recesses of black mangrove, wax myrtle bushes, and grayish-green oyster reefs. The creature, most likely a fish, makes a large wake headed out into the Caminada Pass. With a silvered quickness, it proceeds crashing through yellow reeds and obsidian alluvial-stained saltwater before diving into the rippling depths. Must have been a large redfish or a saltwater gar. From then on, I walk the wharf to home. Sounds from here on out are the wind whistling and ocean waves from the far-off shores. Each step I make is a creaking and clacking of my boot heels on graying, decayed wood of the bridge. I'm taking this 300-yard walk to our home nestled on an adjacent island. I'm careful and hopeful this old walkway can still hold my weight and not drop me into the pooled blackness of the surrounding water below. The night is as black as pitch when I make it off our bridge onto the island toward the house. Now, I'm in the quiet of home. Long, winding shadows and more swaying grasses seem to whisper and surround me as I stand at the Santini house. Why wouldn't such a rundown place conjure up the thoughts and feelings of being haunted? I get Shirley Jackson's quote in my head. at this moment and imitate in my worst rendition of Christopher Lee's voice. I speak to the collapsing house on 20-foot high creosote pilings as a lost friend gone astray. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone hill house, and whatever walked there walked alone. Except Santney House, you are not brick, but blackened creosote wood. One day, the sea will claim you, as it does all. But that aside, you certainly brought me laughter. But then you broke our hearts and brought my family tears and pain. All I can pray is that you won't last another hurricane. I laugh to myself. Then, as if some memory draws me back further home, that's creosote pilings we packed with sand and cement, Marty. That's 2-foot by 2-foot joists for the floors. And we finished it off with board and batten walls of virgin cypress. This house here will be here for your great-grandkids, Marty, long after we are gone. Open the creaking door covered in spider webs and say these words. Daddy, if you only knew how prophetic your words to me would become. Next winter, Mama would be drowned. I'd be here with you, not sleeping, pacing the shore night and day. In 2 more years, you would be gone. Could you have changed the outcome? Or those words if you tried? Or the words themselves, Daddy, some call out. Did you trigger bad luck and trouble on our family? I'm here now. I'm rustling with a flashlight trying to find a breaker and turn on the power. I want to illuminate the darkness. Time to find out what really happened. I probably will leave with more questions than answers. Will I get the answers I want? Probably not. Will I find closure? Probably not. But can someone really, in all honesty, really register the finality of death? Maybe in this case, the cheating bastard, time, is a good thing. I am logical and governed by rational thought by nature. I was the same even as a child and adolescent. Coming home from school on the day I got the sad news, I took Daddy's death with disbelief. My skepticism grew further when the neighbors said how. Yes, it took some time to comprehend Daddy was gone. On the day he left me, he was smuttering as I fixed morning chicory coffee. Put the spoonful of sugar and heavy cream just as he always liked it. Then ate my breakfast as he stared on with his pale blue eyes to some distance on the Gulf's horizon. The sun broke for sunrise, and we were bathed in that brilliant red glow for our last day together. Never did I think of the sailor's warning of a red sky as I crunched on my honey and oats cereal. Red sky by close of night, sailor's delight. Red sky by the morn, sailors take warning. But didn't I always expect he'd check out too? Did I get that call he was dead? But I don't care of the why Daddy killed himself. That's not the reason I came back. Dying wouldn't be enough to drag me 3 hours away to a place where the electricity and water are half-assed even on a good day. He died, and nothing is going to bring him back. What gives with all the secrecy, cloak, and dagger to get here? Why hide my past from my wife? Why come out here like a Cajun Sherlock Holmes? I believe what kicked off my return was all the speculation of the what. It was a growing itch I couldn't scratch. The what did he do at that moment? What was his mindset? Could he have been kidnapped and murdered? That was a possibility on an island where people could get lost. The what was claws ripping in my head. I'd never faced the what had happened because I had never let him die in my mind. I know, not very rational, all logical. The what has changed now. I've been drawn back here to put the brakes on my family name being promoted for tourism. No more Santony blood will be spilled for Grand Isle's almighty dollar. The rumors have become too much. Rumors from townsfolk and tourists of the wandering Pierre Santony, sightings of him down by the beach, strange things that the town had been reporting in the papers, the weird television show and internet ravings of Daddy's legend brought me in as a fish to a lure. I was here to figure out a puzzle, or better to squash the slight to my family. I would try and sort out and solve the mystery. I'll investigate rumor after rumor, then the sightings and the interviews with alleged witnesses. Most likely I'll get my answer. That some were just crazy. Others will be attention getters or fame seeking. The rest, it's a surefire bet we're drinking or high. Marty, I heard the most peculiar story, honey. And now it's in the Times-Picayune. A man missing, lost at sea, has been seen walking the beaches with an unidentified woman. My wife, Alex, was reading the article in the newspaper. That didn't catch my attention at first. So, people drop off all the time in coastal off-grid towns. Hemingway made a regular habit of it, I scoffed. True. How many are named Santony from Grand Isle? Isn't there a family member of yours lost at sea? I looked up coolly from a pipeline project I was reading over and met her eyes. I had never told my wife about my family, really. I told her I'd become an orphan young, and it was true, I'd been orphaned. But I never went further to the why. Alice had wanted to, but somehow never asked. There are quite a few Santony down there. Is Grand Isle the place in the article? Yes. It's strange, this picture of the man. I could see Alice studying every aspect of the picture. I have a couple of pictures of him and his wife and son. Something was troubling her now as she looked at me, then back down at the pictures. Staring back at Alice, I asked, what's so strange about it? They look like such a happy family. Strange that both would commit suicide by drowning, don't you think? And the last question hooked into my flesh and ripped open an old scar. Let me see that picture. With shaky hands, I had to know. Alice looked up at me slightly perplexed. There we were, in front of our family home. Grass, clean cut, and the ever-present sea behind us. Daddy and Mama, with me in the middle, all smiles and holding hands. I'd been driving them nuts all morning, spinning myself around like a top and making myself dizzy. What was going on? Why were we in the paper? Are they relatives, Mark? Alice asked with the intuition all wives seem to have when there is something amiss with their spouse. I wanted to say, well, Alice, you could say that. The kid could be literally my twin brother, but I didn't. It just bring more questions that I didn't want to answer. Instead, I mumbled in a controlled voice. Nah, just some town crazies with the same last name. I left the conversation there and went prep my bags for another trip to the Middle East. I thought, no need to worry Alice any more than she already is. This latest project is putting her nerves in a frazzle. The sand and sun of Saudi Arabian well sites never have been cool with her. Don't add to her emotional baggage. Besides, it's just some spooky stories about long dead nutcases. Yeah, the nutcases have brought you into the world. Yes, and left me alone, I thought. Was he murdered and tossed to the sea? Many believed that. Was it my aunt, his last caretaker, trying to free herself of the burden of his lunacy? Another good rumor. She did shack up in her old house with a homeless guy, and then sadly, 2 months later, Daddy was gone. Later, when I was old enough to take over the land and house, she and homeless Jose got the proverbial boot, locked up the house, the wharf, and the bridge to the house with a stainless steel gate. Did my daddy's sister do it? Got asked that a lot. A lot of people believe so. I would say to you, now that shacking up with a homeless illegal alien and alleged war veteran with no military record added to the suspicion, it most certainly contributed to me kicking her out of my life and out of our house forever. Did Daddy do himself in, as I said? And I know it sounds cold. Don't care if he did. Death for some is a release from the pain that this world can inflict. I see him sad and alone, downing a bottle of wild turkey, chopping a bottle of psych medication, and tossing himself into the surf. Story over as a sad man joins his beloved for eternity somewhere. Honestly, he just became crab food, like Mama. Daddy had seemed happier in the last days. He seemed to be accepting things and was becoming his old self. What had I missed? What was on his mind that day? That was the one sticking in my skull day and night. It chipped into my skull like an ice pick chipping ice. I could not accept that. It was inconceivable even now that one of the strongest and shrewdest minds I had known finally cashed in his chips and ended it all. All I could think was love ever so powerful to cause Pierre Saint-Me to call the game over and forget about those that loved him still living. Was he that selfish to leave me alone? I went on to college and became a petroleum safety man. I resolved to leave Daddy's memory to the fish and folklore, trekking across jungles, Scottish castles, blazing hot deserts, and ragged mountains. I left Grand Isle and the dead where they belonged, submerged beneath the shifting silt of the past. Alice was to never know my past. In my mind, I was an orphan. 10 years later, I still am. Now it's 2 months since Daddy's birthday. He'd have been 66. And 4 months since all those newspaper stories kicked up. Went on that desert job and I returned home to Alice's hugs at the door. Then there were 2 screaming brown-haired boys happy to see Dad with one tail-wagging ecstatic Labrador falling behind. A week after being home, it was the paranormal program, Strange Seas, that caught our attention. The narrator, Steven Weber, was brilliant. I mean, he caught every inflection and nuance of the Acadian dialect. He brought a sense of humor and a menace with each paragraph of narration. Reenactments were Shakespearean and, dare I say, of award category. The program began with roaring seas and dark, crackling thunderheads. Stephen began, "Somewhere in the vastness of the oceans, we have yet to dive beneath her mysteries. We only have explored just 10% of this hidden world. What secrets the sea must still hold." As Weber continued narration, images of all manner of sea legend, from the Flying Dutchman to the Kraken and finally Loch Ness, ended the intro. "Welcome to Strange Seas." And Stephen spoke a name and showed a home I hadn't been to in 25 years. It's here on the remote extension of Grand Isle that Caminada Pass lies. Somewhere beneath the treacherous currents and crashing waves were the remains of Pierre and Dominique Saint-Me. Or are they? Voice echoed Mama and Daddy's name down our large hall. The sound was like whispering ghosts from the past come back to say hello. There was the father-in-law my wife never knew. There was the stilted house of my family. It certainly contrasted with our brooding mansion we kept on the outskirts of Lafayette. A fuse had been lit in my head. That itch I may have mentioned, and must admit my temper had kicked up at the people of the island. I left home the next day with a burden of uncertainty and woe. Too many questions, too many inquiries. I walked the shoreline to our home. I shudder even now as I hear the waves fall and think of his roaring ramblings. My own skin breaks into cold sweat remembering my last encounter with my father's psychotic side. I remember the shame of getting Pierre Santini locked up in a hospital after he nearly set the local church ablaze. Back then, Pierre's eyes had a manic red glow from days of no sleep. Clothes smelled of the mold of a stale ship. Worst, his body from his granite brow to his scratched and scarred legs and feet dripped with crazed, soured sweat. A small flock of seagulls shriek and cry. In gray and dark skies, they begin bobbing down around the rips of current just past our house. It's the churning of fish and shrimp in the Caminada that draw them to swoop and dive around me for food. It tells me in my final wandering to the house, the tide is going out to sea. I watch those last fleeting moments before dusk with a nostalgic gaze to heaven. Yes, this had to be what real heaven was. The happy memories flood back on my last approach to the house. I remember the jolly, wise man whose advice on life at times was invaluable. You have to focus, couillon. Never let the work beat you. That was his saying anytime I wanted to give up on a project. Another was, smell like fish, you'll be quite the dish. Then he'd hit me with the guts of a just skinned speckled trout and run off while I chased after him screaming, no fair, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I speak words to the lonely dock. I look at our aged gray fishing wharf. Then slowly, toward the porcelain sink, I cast my somber gaze where we'd cleaned so many fish, to the cobwebs now covering the outside sink. I say again, I grit my teeth. I wasn't ready. Only the wharf overlooking the water creaks back. I went to put power on the place. An hour fumbling in the dark. I realized someone had ripped out our electric meter. It'd be a long night if I couldn't figure something out. Buzzing, stinging mosquitoes, and sandflies weren't helping me think. Crushing one bug between my fingers, I figure a solution. I had a roll of copper sheeting I used on a sink project for the wife. That'd do until I could get the town electric guy, T-Black Chesson, out here. I walked the mile back to the truck, where the winds were picking up and getting cooler. Felt like a storm was moving north down to the island. Maybe we'd push out these mosquitoes and flies. Then again, maybe they wouldn't. I heard the crabs and fish moving in the shallows. Not that the tide had moved out. With just a crescent of moon, I could make out some of them rippling across between the mangrove and into the marsh. How I thought my family would probably love this place. Then a short of pain stabbed my heart as I let a memory trickle in. Mama was sitting on Daddy's lap at the table while pulling on his beard. He'd just come home in after 2 weeks at sea on the Black Magic. The two of them were laughing about something that had happened on the shrimping boat. Daddy bellowed. T. Claude Dufresne done flipped out the boat again, shit. We caught the ugliest shrimp the world has ever seen. I mean, U-G-L-Y. Yeah, you know that's not nice. T. Claude is just clumsy. Mom went to fussing playfully. Yeah, the 3 times on the same hitch. I know shrimpers went their whole life not falling overboard. And one guy we know, Mr. Jesus Christ, never fell overboard either. He laughed a little quieter. Mom appeared shocked at such a blasphemy. But then she winked and grinned at him. They both laughed on that one. Memories. More laughter. That's what I recall from that instant in our past. From what I remembered, T. Claude had slipped on a slimy pogey fish and went over. In the moments before the fall, it could have been a bad day for T. Claude, especially if inexperienced captain had been at the helm. But Pierre Santini was not one of those. As T. Claude landed into the trawl net, certain to be drugged under the boat, Daddy hooked his backside. In the same seconds before catastrophe, Daddy simultaneously flipped his deckhand into the picking box. Had this been a first-time event for the clumsy deckhand, no one would have noticed. But it was a T. Claude record 3 times of almost certain drowning in one season. This was certainly a record for the Black Magic, and possibly for all shrimpers in a single shrimping season. How to describe him to you? I guess, take a look at any leathered man's skin who spent more than 10 years working on the ocean. Compare the grays of driftwood to Daddy's salt and pepper beard. When you see the tangle of seagrass or kelp in a prow, think of his long curly hair on an aged crown of head. As you see the first light of a frosty cold morning on ocean blue, see Pierre Santini's eyes staring off to the sea's mysteries in the beyond. What bygone age was this man, my father, truly from? Clad in rainproof garments that creaked of salt, sand, and surf, where had he journeyed in his voyages on Mother Ocean? In the recesses of blackened rain and seaward were all hidden the secrets of Pierre's seafaring, shrouded by a cover that seemed years of rain and wave, hid his face and blue eyes when he donned that mariner's cap. Worn rubber boots that had trekked endless shores, ruffled in dirty clothes that had seen rocking decks and shifting bunks. In those moments, to me, Daddy looked like someone who had stepped from an old pirate sloop eons ago, or had commandeered a submarine 20,000 leagues below. It wasn't just me that noticed the man. Our community took notice of their celebrated sailor. If he went into the local store for supplies, old sailors gave him the knowing nod of maritime travelers. Celebrating at festivals or with the crew at Roscoe's Cajun Cantina, his voice would roar as a great wave. A solemn shanty carried on his voice held the power of a gusting wind. A gale he carried that once had been passed from father to son, or mother to daughter. It was another one of those magic moments when the world was golden and everything seemed right in the world. How I miss even now the air of mystery that cloaks all aged men of the sea. A wave crashes in the distant horizon. In that moment, I hear a distant sea song, most likely from the past, and I can't help the rush of tears flowing out of my eyes. Mama and Daddy, why did you leave me? I say it to lonely sea winds. Living with my father was difficult. He burned a candle of grief that burned to ash everything and everyone around him. He raged at me as a child and as a teenager. With each beating and each ridiculed argument, I grew to hate and despise him. From Pierre Santini's tirades of sorrow and grief, I learned to grow my own fires of loathing and disgust for him. By that time, however, I had long run away to the Navy. Daddy was ever difficult and more the burden to the town by the time I'd come home, a war hero. He'd become a taciturn man, a man living alone in our house of pilings we had hand shoveled and set in sand. A home we had built from driftwood, fortification which had endured hurricanes and mass floods. Our home that he and I and Mama had constructed on the windswept point of land where he heard the voices of the kildee, the snipe, the gulls and terns, and of howling wind and crashing sea. Our winters held the cries of winterfowl and the low-hum voices of the community. Our summers held the roar of boat engines, the joyful cries of tourists, and the horns of annoyed vacationers trying to get to their camps. Often, I got the letter or call that Daddy had gone island crazy again. And time and again, I worried how he might hurt someone who didn't know the crazy loon of Caminada Pass. It was said of Pierre Santley that he answered the gulls and the terns. I heard it in jest how he fed and pet the great pelicans and sang songs of merriment. On moonlit nights, he could be seen wandering the dunes, speaking with the ghosts from the cold sea, laughing and running with whistling winds and arguing with the surf. But here I grew curious. One story by Maddox Badeau. I swear, Marty, your daddy wasn't alone. He's just island crazy since Mama drowned. He thinks it was his fault, Maddox. Daddy took me out there too many times to hear the sounds. There ain't nothing out there. I slapped my old childhood friend on the back and we laughed over a beer. But I tell you, Marty, I heard strange tones, like chiming bells, brother. I see you looking like I went bananas too. But I didn't. I dismissed it then as a collective or suggestive hypnosis my daddy might have caused. I had never heard what Daddy called the sounds. Maddox had. He said they were muted sounds made by a great whale, but not quite a whale. A sound that was ancient, as if made by batracian beast of an unknown origin. Or as bells underwater that chimed and cried out in happiness and great exhilaration. He said he literally had to tear himself away from the shore, or he would have went swimming to them. Daddy made his living by the sea. He fished tarpon and redfish for the tourists. He shrimped the icy waters of the pass in winters, as all the shrimpers did. It brought us food. Though he was not a great mariner, it brought us security, which kept us afloat year after year, until the sea took Mama and my daddy's mind. It seemed storm clouds raged in his mind after that. I couldn't help him mend his heart, nor did I care to, as he took all his pain out on me. After her funeral, he stayed days on the ocean, till I went out with family and friends and brought him home. When we fished the shrimp now, he cared little for the haul or the money, whether he cast his net into the sea by day or by night. He would throw it back over until I fought him foolishly to stop. Dad, how will we eat if you throw it back? You want us to lose the camp? Still have thousands to pay for the hospital bills. Stop! I yelled and hit him to no avail, but sometimes he'd sit, and I could bring in enough to keep the creditors and wolves at bay. You just don't understand, son. They don't make people like your mother. I saw the tears pour from his face. I saw the pain in those eyes of crystalline blue. And for a brief moment, I felt something for this man of salt and iron. She was the love of your life. She was Mama to me. She'd want you to be happy again. Move on, you know. So my words hurt him again. You'll always be stupid to the real things of this world, Marty. I tried to make you listen. You'll never hear them or her. We were back to our father and son war. We brought our meager catches to the Grand Isle docks and up to Leesville if we felt we were getting a runaround on price. Again, I fought Daddy on this point as he didn't seem to care anymore. Our fights sometimes brought us up the bayou further to sell. I heard the worst of tales of Pierre Santley when I was pulled back to our shack again as a man of the world. It was for a family reunion of sorts, stopping in to see friends at a local dock. The islanders were abuzz of my crazy father's latest delusion. We laughed and shook our heads in merriment, but inside I made my mind up to commit him permanently. John and Nancy Freelow, who owned the Leeville dock, told the tale. John started. It was a moonlit night, honey, wasn't it? Yes, dear, mid-September, I believe, John. Real cold booger, for sure. Nancy Freelow answered, made a shivering noise as she said the latter. Marty, you already know you brought no fish in. I'm sure Maddox called you. He'd been going out and staying longer and longer on that ocean like he did back in the day. John shook his head, rethinking the memory. I remember, Mr. John, how many times I'd have to go get him with Perrin or whoever was available, I added in. Well, he brought no crabs, no shrimp, no fish, or even any oysters in the Leeville. Only carried himself with this god-awful strange look, Marty. It was the astonished look that caught all of us. It wasn't his usual crazy. He had Satan's blue eyes were wide. He kept staring, as if he had sun blindness from the water. John nodded to his wife, who agreed. Nancy Freeloop continued the story. Like John said, Marty, your daddy looked as if he'd stared too long into the sunrise or sunset and had been blinded. We sat him down and offered him a drink of water or a Coke. He asked us point blank for whiskey. Pierre Santon might be crazy, but he never drank hard whiskey, so that stopped everyone at the scales. John continued rubbing his temples as he went on. Some of the curious who saw his crazy spells came over. He'd have none of their foolishness to join him. But your dad, with the aid of more wild turkeys, squawked and babbled all manner of strange tales. It was eerie to watch Pierre Santon talk as though he spoke only to himself. Even weirder, as he rambled and didn't seem to see anyone watching him. Pat Montague added to their strange tale of Daddy. John and Nancy, you remember how pale he got talking about what happened out on the reef? Marty, I have never seen anything scare your father. Never. Even in his craziest fits. He was spooked. Go on, Pat. Finish what you heard. John motioned to Pat to continue as we listened. Pat continued. Monstrous, yet beautiful, Pierre said of what he saw. He had heard those weird tones again out on Azale Reef. He was in another fit of depression and anger over your mama, Marty, when he said he threw the anchor down on the reef. Pierre cast his net and brought up a ton of shrimp, crabs, and fish. Then, something else. I went ahead to stop the nonsense to go home. That was a great tale, John and Nancy. Pat, I see fishing. This is what spooked him. I get it. Time to go on down to the camp. Hold on, Marty. Damn, you are impatient as he was when Pierre was your age. You are your father's son. John said words that cut like daggers. Yeah, some people need to leave a mentally unstable man alone. Daddy's had these crazy spells and weird stories all my life. I don't need to hear anymore. And yes, you are right, John. I saw my tone was direct now, and John was trying to understand my meaning. Right about what? I saw him a little perplexed. I'm Marty Santon, son of Pierre Santon. I have his temper, too. I cracked John across the mouth and laid him out on the floor, watching the whole dock stop as I continued. Say another bad thing about my dad, bring up another crazy tale around here, and I find out about it, and I'll give you a lot worse. I stormed out of the parking lot as I saw Pat Montague walking up to my truck. I guess he was a slow learner too. I got out to knock him out too when he threw up his hands. Hey, easy, Marty. We weren't disrespecting your daddy. I swear, my man. John and Nancy really were concerned. No more crazy stories, you dig? I was trying to count to 10 and cool off. We aren't the ones that made fun of him all these years, Marty. Just know that. Just hear this last part. And if you want to knock my block off, feel free. At least I prepared you. I saw maybe, and it was a big maybe, that Pat cared. Go on. I had simmered down, but the thought to run him over was still an option. Pierre said there was something in the net. Someone he hadn't seen in a while. He never said who, Marty, but he smiled as he described whatever it was. Pierre said her face was still the same. But now she had evolved and was amphibian or marine-like. Bells or chimes, he called her voice, with the gutturals of seabirds, brigands or cranes. Then he stood and went on and got up smiling and dancing drunkenly, speaking now how she could produce her own internal music. Saw Pat's own amazement at seeing Daddy acting a fool again. And who was he a delusional about, Pat? Let me guess. Mama is back from the cold ground. Jesus, man. He had another mama dream, man. Shook my head and proceeded to drive off. I left Pat Montague in a swirl of cloud and shell dust. Now Mama's a mermaid, I said to myself with laughter. Stopped in at the Bon Voyage Marina with the wisest soothsayer on Grand Isle called Thayer. If anyone could clear my head and get me to laugh before I faced Pierre, it was him. He was one part Jimmy Buffett and the rest Clint Eastwood. If Clint Eastwood ever smiled. He's telling everyone he caught Mama in his net. Daddy said she's a mermaid. We were in back of the marina, throwing a few fishing lines. I saw him look up from casting his line as I had said the latter. Your daddy said she was not a mermaid. Carl continued. According to him, Marty, she had 2 legs that fanned out as a cobra's might. Also, he described in detail that Dominique Santini had feet too, but her toes were clawed and webbed. I mean, Pierre said she had hands, though they too were webbed and clawed. And you believe him, Carl? I saw him wince when I asked. Carl Thayer sighed and looked at me with eyes of the deepest brown. He believes it, Marty. Your daddy had one hell of a shock losing Dominique. He wants her back with y'all so bad that he spends weeks not eating and not sleeping and just sailing out on the ocean blue. Give him this one delusion, Marty. Is it so bad to let the man believe the one person he loved more than anything in this crummy place came back to him? Even if she's an ugly porpoise? I smiled. Fish? He called Mama a fish. We both laughed and fished a little longer before I made the trek home for the Santini reunion. On the drive to Caminada Pass, I thought of the last words Carl had said. Pierre had told me the thing had Dominique's face. She knew Dominique's memories and her songs that we sang together when we were all young. She even asked about you. But her body was the smell of salt and surf and the color of the sea. The town, as usual, laughed at him and ridiculed the crazy man. Many joked and jested with him and his mermaid wife. But he heard them not. A couple of older, wizened sailors did not laugh. They had spent years on seas further than the Gulf of Mexico and far colder. They had heard of the strange tales whispered by the old men and women of Hyperborea, the Greek Isles, and Lovecraft's Innsmouth, from the days of the wooden mast and sail. Astounding monstrosities and trysts observed by Indonesian clipper ships and the East India trade. Nuptials between humanity and beasts of trench and abyss. No, these hardened mariners, wise men and women, did not laugh. They would hear the tales at the local restaurant or at the taverns. They only listened, secretly slunk away, and held secret what they knew. There was no jesting of Pierre Santini by them. Pierre only heard the night winds and the ancient chimes of the mysterious sea. He no longer heard the crude baiting of his bar companions as he rambled his tales. Pierre cried, I held her, Roscoe, Auntie boy. I held her the same way we did when we played Marshall Tucker and danced the night away. I helped her today out of that large island of seaweed near the old lighthouse You see, she was caught in a nest of the stuff. I helped my girl through the maze. Pierre shivered, still soaked from the excursion. Oh, you helped the fish again, Pierre? This time it was the other bartender, Cisco, who inquired. My wife ain't no fish. She's something else. But I don't know what. Her skin, it's cold now. Even the texture was more like a pilot whale or porpoise. I watched her dive down out of sight into the darkness at Diablo Point. He sighed a minute, then pridefully smiled to Cisco before saying, my Dominique came back to me. She came back from those fathomless depths to reappear mon ami. She raised her arms out of the sea to wave, then went back down below to her new home. I know I'll see her again. Oh, you will, Pierre? Cisco winked and gave him a sarcastic grin. Pierre raised his fist and threw his glass, missing Cisco. Then he yelled, yeah, go on with you. I know you don't believe me, but I know I'll see Dominique again. I'll be with her soon, too. It has to be our time, our fate. After that night, Pierre Santini frequented less and less Cisco's bar. If Daddy went there, he ordered a round up front, and he quietly sat in a back stall alone. Daddy would avoid islanders like Bruce Bartholomew, who would ask him, how's Dominique the fish, Pierre? All them fins and curves, and me with no brakes. Another like Kirby Dupre would ask, if she turned into a porpoise or fish thing, do you have to remarry? Or will you have to propose all over again? The whole bar erupted on that one, I was told. My father kept quiet, never spoke or bragged anymore. He drank his Dixie, looked out on the vast sea, then set off for home. I heard in later conversations that Pierre Santini did not fish again at Diablo Point. He cast his nets and lures elsewhere, closer to Caminada Pass. His initial joy had been poisoned by a deep fear of the ocean's unknowns. I tell you, Luke, now I don't know if I could see her swim away again. Hell, I don't know if it might be something trying to trick me. Daddy had whispered to one of his old deckhands months later. Luke Sharpenshape had said it was more of dread that Pierre had now. Daddy had seen his Dominique again, and now fate was pulling him into her own nest of seaweed, possibly not to reunite, but to drown him below by a predator that looked like Mama, the thing that he had encountered on that moonlit night. I like to believe now, as I walk this stretch of beach, that Daddy had come to terms with whatever had happened, that he had decided Pierre Santini would control his own fate. I find comfort in those thoughts. Thoughts that until his own end by the sea, he so loved that Daddy stayed his course. Maybe the islanders that saw Daddy standing on the point of land, looking out into the sea, got it wrong. I believe the man they saw wasn't watching for some person or some vessel to make its appearance over the horizon. To this day, I think he reached his arms out to his beloved phantom, Dominique Santini, as if longing for that impossible of possibilities, only to feel the ominous clouds of rain and gloom and despair. Surely a disappointment to Daddy, knowing his happiness loomed forever out of his grasp. A reunion with a lost love that would never arrive, as with most who lose them to the sea. I was catching up with another childhood friend on the island just before Daddy's demise. Davy Martin followed up with me on the week prior to Daddy's death. It was useful insight about Daddy's state of mind. We had a nice crab cake sandwich together at the Starfish for a noon meal. He just quit talking to everyone, Marty. It was like he was already gone. A dead man walking after that encounter on Diablo Point. Pierce set his mind to being the town hermit. He wandered more and more away from town. It was seldom we saw him at Cisco's. Then he stopped to come and visit altogether. If he fished or shrimp during that time, a rarity. He sold up the bayou and shunned us. He even quit buying at the Sherway all his supplies. And I guess the mermaid tail was spread up and down the bayou and all over the Louisiana coast. I had to ask him. Yeah, that was one hell of a story, Marty. You couldn't pay for gossip that good around here. Sure, it was carried up to Lockport, through Vacherie, even into New Orleans. He scratched his raven black beard as he continued. Even beyond New Orleans, my brother. I heard Bayou Mancheck and Avoca Island got wind of what happened. Funny thing, too. Those winding, dark swamps where many old Cajuns live didn't laugh or make fun. A couple made the sign of the cross. A year went by, and another, and yet another. And then one night the word was brought to Grand Isle that Pierre Santny had ended his life by diving into the rip current. Rescuers had braved the frigid waters and surf, but to no avail. They searched the house of Caminada Pass for a possible cause or a suicide note. None was found. One of the town's investigators and our local physician, Dr. Jerry Haydell, had made some interesting discoveries within our home. Davy Martin had urged me to question him for closure. I haven't spoken about that night in quite a while, Marty. If you were not his son, and just as bull-headed, I'd still not say. I smiled, and he smiled as he said that. I was there. I know what we saw. It was so cold in the place, like as if the whole house had been sunk below the ocean. It smelled damp, and with an eel-like odor. Moisture, or fog, if you will, cloaked the house, and there was a wetness clinging to the walls. A glistening and glowing slime dripped from the doorknob, in some places on the walls and even to the bed. He took a drink of water from a bottle he had with him and continued. Then I saw 2 sets of wet and slime oozed footprints on the floor, made by feet with webbed toes, Marty. We walked the footprints out onto a rock trail from your house and down to the edge of Caminada Pass. Crazy, I know, right? Dr. Jerry continued. I spoke once after around the Crown Royal at Cisco's about the incident. They ran with the gossip I spouted, and my team and I were laughed and ridiculed. Pierre was drowned, they said. It was glowworms that caused the goo. Those were just old footprints changed by the rain or the seashore wave. I had to ask. So Dr. Jerry, you don't know anyone on the island with webbed feet. Maybe some crazy place up north once. A place near Arkham, Massachusetts. I believe the town inhabitants of Innsmouth had a story and evidence of webbed feet and hands. He took another sip of water and continued. Everyone went up to your house on Caminada Pass, Marty. Too many busy bees, too curious, if you know what I mean. They saw for themselves what was to be seen, all looking for the monster, and all came back disappointed at having seen nothing. And I'm glad that mystery stayed dead, Marty. I took the added ridicule and silenced my team. Why, Dr. Jerry? I was dumbfounded at what I heard. Because, Marty, I'm ashamed to say for once in my old life, I was terrified by the possibility. Think about it. Living fishmen and women, legendary creatures that we all thought were myth. The idea that I had sent my children into those waters, or that we all swam those waters with lurking creatures out there. Terrifying. I saw him look out on a rolling wave and stare intensely for the next few minutes. Maybe terrifying, Dr. Jerry, but a wonderful mystery still the same. Gives me hope that we still have not discovered everything. We haven't solved all the mysteries of the deep blue. Maybe there's still magic in this world left to be discovered. We both smiled at that. Chapter 3. Pierre. I took another long walk around our house. It was after days of investigating more stories of Daddy. My home on Caminada Pass has been taken back by the sea. Gale force winds and the weather had their way with it. Like claws, they are tearing away a shingle here and a board there. Posts are twisting with wear and the windows have shattered panes I'll need to get to soon. The hawks, gulls, and terns fly without hearing a human voice. I look out to Diablo Point, then back to Caminada Pass. The full moon shines brilliant silver on those ocean waters. And I could hear the ripple of moving salt water through the marsh grasses and the roar of distant waves against the beach. And I sat down on a nearby dune to take in the peaceful scenery. The cool ocean winds kept away the sandflies and mosquitoes as I sat there checking the horizon. I don't know what I saw. Maybe all the crazed stories had made me want to believe. Yes, maybe it was the suggestion of a possibility that my parents had lived on beyond their mortal coil. I say that possibility, however incredible, caused my mind in that instant to become delusional. I can't accept the supernatural in this instance. It was a feeling, I'll say, of being watched. It was that cool chill of knowing eyes somewhere in the dark were peering at you. Never would I have guessed where. I looked to the marshes. I looked to our crumbling house. I looked out with an eagle's stare on the distant beaches. It was, to my astonishment, when I glanced on the sea's distant horizon for a brief moment, I saw a pair of silvery forms, mid-torso, out in the surf. But at those depths, there was no way it was possible. I made out their features as they moved to within 50 feet of me, just outside of roaring waves, still mid-torso. There was no mistaking either. However fish-like they might be now, it was Pierre and Dominique Santny, Mom and Dad. They both waved and smiled pridefully. I saw tears in both their eyes. Both put their arms out for me to go to them, to embrace my long-lost parents. God, had I the courage to accept such a gift? But I remembered my wife and my children. I could not leave them yet. I blew kisses to both of them. I saw Dad nod and pull Mom back. She waved one last time with him. Then the two of them submerged back into the darkness of the sea. I sobbed uncontrollably for what seemed like hours after they had gone. As I drive home, now I know what the town of Grand Isle has always known. And along the Louisiana coast, the whispers in time died away, but I'm sure the gossip and the dark legends still persist. No suspicions of murder or suicide are believed in those tales. Something more profound, a darkness fraught from the depths beyond, with ever greater wonder and possibly ever-growing terror. Long after my departure back to my wife and kids, Daddy still is seen. From the venerable old Jeremy Hennessy, lifelong shrimper, came a tale as he arrived at the dock one night with his crew. Jeremy swore, "I've never seen anything like it. Swimming off Diablo Point. A strange company of something. We thought they were pilot whales or even humpbacks. And we saw what had to be hands and arms. As we drafted my boat, Tina Lynn, closer, we saw they were part human and like a porpoise. But that wasn't right either. Because some looked like giant salamanders or eels. The way they moved through the sea, gliding and using their arms as Olympic swimmers was incredible. Are you sure, Jeremy, they had hands? Moonlight can be tricky out there, as you know. I know the moon can play tricks and all. Larry Seminole asked a question on everyone's mind. But this was Captain Jeremy Hennessy, who scoffed and laughed at such foolish sea stuff as mermen. It caught all the island by surprise, his statement. I know I made fun of poor Pierre and y'all. I can't explain what those things were. They had passed close to my boat. I thought they were just the usual whale, or what have you. I showed a light between the moonlight, and they had the greenish glow on them. He cast his eyes on the crowd gathering at the dock as he went on. I'll never forget the glow they made. Phantoms. Yeah, ghosts rising from the depths of the Gulf of Mexico. And here's where we all freaked out. The group swam up from the darkness of the sea, past us, and sang in a sort of bell chime, going by us singing a chime and chant to something. Maybe it was a worship or praise. I bet they chanted the Charlie the Tuna. Old Fred Boudreaux had to get us laughing with that one. I know Fred Hall sound. Mermen, and yes, mermaids, damn it. But I'm here to say I was wrong. Pierre Santini wasn't crazy. And he was right about one thing. Captain Jeremy could see blank stares on all the townsfolk's eyes. Scratching his sailor's cap, Bruce Bartholomew asked, "Why'd you bring up Pierre, Captain Jeremy?" In a whisper that people asked for him to speak up and say again, he spoke. "I saw him." "You saw who, Jeremy?" Everyone in the gathered crowd asked. "Pierre Santini and Dominique swimming with those things, glowing green with scales, webbed hands, and porpoise skin. There they were, naked, like the rest of those monstrosities. Heard their voices chiming that prayer, too. A prayer to some god, I guess." Captain Jeremy saw them. There was still a lot of disbelief. I shouted to them. I said, "Pierre!" Then I said, "Dominique!" And in utter shock, Pierre and Dominique turned, and I saw it was them. Bruce Bartholomew asked the next question. "What happened then, Captain Jeremy?" The whole monstrous, glowing school of those creatures leaped as a school of tuna, then dove under the waves. That was the last we saw them. We turned the Tina Lynn around from Diablo Point, ran her all the way back to Grand Isle. I'm never going back there again. Captain Jeremy Hennessy and his crew stuck to his story and spoke openly about that night. Captain Jeremy and the crew were paid off to keep their mouths shut. And the longer he did, the more it became apparent that someone, possibly Gary Schwest, a secret group, not the Masons, had shut him down. Again, gossip flew. But to this day, no one knew for sure who the group was. Captain Jerry not only never sailed Diablo Point again, but the Tina Lynn never sailed again. Long after, months later, on another full moon night, Pete Besson saw Pierre Santini. Pete had sailed with Daddy. He knew the contours of the man's face and expressions. With his young son on a moonlit fishing trip by Caminada Pass, Pete and his son spotted Daddy moving with the rip, trolling with their bateau toward the center of Caminada Pass in the moonlight. They stopped as Daddy submerged. Pete spoke to everyone at the dock about his encounter. And suddenly I saw him 10 yards off the right bow. As I live and breathe, I saw Pierre Santini rise from the depths of the sea. Pierre brought his body above the currents to mid-torso. He could have reached out and grabbed both me and Skippy from the boat if Pierre chose to. I almost touched him with my gaff. Pete picked up Skippy and held him. Skippy took off his daddy's baseball cap and twisted it as Pete further spoke. There was Pierre in front of us, There he was standing somehow in 50 feet of moving water, as Jesus himself did. He stood in that water as if held up by someone or something. But he wasn't interested that much with me. Well, who was he interested in, Pete? Old Spanky Hotard interrupted to ask. It was kind of a sad moment. He was looking toward the old Santney house. Seemed kind of hoping to see his son Marty, I guess. Maybe wished the knucklehead would fix the place up. Pete grabbed back his baseball cap from Skippy, then spoke. His eyes were Pierre Santney, no doubt. Silver moonlight lit up the water as it ran from that hippie hairdo and beard of his. I saw something really weird too. He had gill slits like a shark on his neck. What happened next? Did he get closer to the boat? Did he have a trident like Aquaman? Someone in the back of a foreman group asked. Pete couldn't recognize the voice. Pete answered them. To answer whoever asked, he sank away and left. He never did get closer. And I don't think I saw a trident, but who knows? He is certainly not Aquaman. I am reconciling slowly with the known and the unknown of my father. I went to the island to get answers. I came back with more questions and the possibility of hope. I scoffed and dismissed such foolish notions that Daddy's ravens bore any merit. But God, what an incredible story, if it's true. To have not only one, but both parents out there alive. In a mysterious and wondrous and definitely terrifying world. It's mind-blowing. If just one part of what the Islanders have seen out in Caminada Pass or Diablo Point is true, it will change the darkness of our evil world, hopefully forever. Conclusion. So, if you're ever traveling along the Louisiana coast near Grand Isle, remember, many things are whispered about Pierre Santney. You may find a roaring bonfire on a beach with crashing waves. At the bonfire, people will be listening to my father's tale. The aged mariner may proclaim, and on the first winter breaker, Grand Isle's coldest winter, Pierre Santney plunged into the sea and was seen no more. The teller of the tale may pause with haunting eyes as the fires crack in the bonfire, the sea roars, and the wind howls with possibly an ancient chime. With a whispering voice on the third crash of a wave, they may even say, but none on the island will ever say he died. Thank you for listening. Have a great night.